Guys, today I'm going to be trying to figure out why this Indy 440 won't start. Now, what I have kind of gone through with this one is I've gone through the entire fuel system, and what it would do originally was it would start up, run perfectly fine for about 10 minutes, then it would die, and it would run like shit, then it would die, and then start back up after you cool it down, run just fine and die. Well, I don't really feel like, to be perfectly honest here, I don't feel like fucking with this 440 much more. Basically, like I said, I've been through the entire fuel system. Right now it won't even start. When I got here, I had to drag it into the shop, and I've got a couple 488s that are just sitting around ready to go, so I may end up just kind of swapping this to a 488. So I think that's what I'm gonna do. It definitely looks like the best. The only thing I can figure out it could be is the stator, so I think that's what we're gonna try. All right, so kind of my first order of business here is to check compression on this cylinder. We got about you got a bit over 120. Same thing on this other cylinder, so I think we do have a good motor here. So this is the 488 that was planned on going in there. And I look in here, and well, we got a bad piston. So, I mean, I've got extra pistons for this. I got one extra piston actually, but I don't feel like putting that in. So I think we're gonna tear out this stator, and I'm gonna tear apart that one and tear apart the one on the snowmobile and see if we can just switch them. I know we're gonna have to also switch the CDI boxes since them are different. Right, I got the puller on the flywheel here. About to torque on that and get that off. You know, another thing that I'm really annoyed about is this is the bolt for the battery tray, and also that's a stupid carriage bolt, which means that if you're trying to get the battery tray back on, because in order to get the side cover off, you need to get the battery tray off. But then to get the battery tray off, you need to get that bolt out. Well, then, you know, if you reverse the order of that, you have to put the side cover on. But when the side cover's on, you cannot reach your hand down there to put the battery tray in. So I can't figure out if every time you're supposed to service this shit, if you're just supposed to, you know, completely replace the fucking, or you just completely remove the motor. But I don't really like that. I don't like that so much so that I might actually throw a weld on there to make my life easier in the future. Right, so here we've got our stator. Now I guess it's time to remove that and get the other one out and and put it back in and then see if it works or not. Got the stator out of this one. Okay, so here's our two stators. This is the old one and this is the one we're putting in. Now this is the older style. As you can see, they're really two different, completely different setups. They will obviously bolt in place with each other. You just got to switch out the CDI from each other. But yeah, this one should in theory produce higher power, although it really wasn't even producing enough power to get the heaters to work, so I don't know how much that was working. I know this one works, so we're gonna put this one in and see if it at least runs, and if not, we're gonna just tear the motor out and probably rebuild that 488 and put it back in. But yeah, I'm hoping that once we put this in, and it'll at least fire and run decently, because, you know, I've had way too much time into seeing why the hell that one doesn't work. Now, if I'm not mistaken, I do believe that this is the ignition one on this stator. I don't necessarily see anything wrong with it, but I guess I'm not totally sure. So in the end, we're just gonna end up having to rebuild this whole 488 anyway. I've got a piston in here that'll go right into it. Yeah, kind of my issue is the putting the stator in that 440 just didn't fix it. So I don't know what the hell is wrong with it, but we're gonna just hopefully put a 488 into it. And kind of the reason I'm doing it is, if you go back and look at the video, the seal here, this crank seal is bad on that one. It was leaking out oil when I was replacing it, and I just chose to kind of ignore it. And well, look where that got me. You know, once it's died, it floods out horribly, and then I just, you know, at that point, what the hell is the point of wanting to try and use that 440? So mainly just because of that crank seal. I don't have crank seals, but I've got a 488 that needs a piston. That's why I'm gonna replace it. So one interesting thing here is I've got a spare jug and a spare piston. This is actually, if you guys want a tip for some really cheap 488 pistons, just look up a piston for actually a Polaris 250 Trailblazer or Trail Boss four-wheeler. They're the exact same piston. So yeah, that's actually what this is. The only issue is if you get the really cheap ones from Amazon, they tend to sometimes come with broken rings. But yeah, I think this is just whatever rings I had lying around, and it actually worked This was on that trail, or this was on that Indy trail that fucking, I'm gonna have a video up on the channel where it blew a connecting rod out of the side. Yep. This was the side that didn't ruin, so I might use the jug to go with it. I might not. I might use the one that's in here. I don't know yet, but it's this side that needs, it's the PTO side here that needs to be needs to be replaced, and that is in fact the side that jug is off of, even though I'm pretty sure they're identical, because why wouldn't they be? So I think, yeah, we're just gonna tear into this and get that piston replaced. Okay, well, less than 5 minutes later, I got the head off. You know, it looks pretty decent in here. I may end up reusing this this cylinder just because it looks pretty decent. It matches to the engine, and well, the head gasket's kind of stuck on it. I do have the other head gasket from that one, but then I'd have to clean that one up, and it's whatever. So the other thing I'm probably gonna do while I have all of it off here is clean up all this clean up this air shrouding here, because that's kind of bent in, and I might just try and cut all that clean. And because basically this, when I bought this thing, this was like $100 marketplace find. I bought for that 488 Panther swap I did, and it didn't even have a top cover, and I took the one out of that, you know, that's when I parted out that blown up 488, so I had the top off that, so the top and the bottom don't match, you know, they're two different tops and bottoms, and it's all cut up. So I'm just gonna cut it up even more, but get rid of all those jagged edges and hopefully make it look just a little bit better. But otherwise, you know, it's just air shrouding, it doesn't much matter. And yeah, now the real make or break moment at this point is if that base gasket decides to break when we put her out, when we take her off. I got the cylinder off. Unfortunately, the old crusty base gasket decided to rip, so yeah. But anyway, right here you can see this this crack starting to form here, and it's good I didn't run this very much longer. So we're gonna get that piston changed out, and I think the first thing is I'm gonna go through and hopefully make a decent base gasket, unless, yeah, no, that cylinder doesn't have a base gasket on it. So yeah, I think that's gonna be what I have to do. I think I got enough gasket paper here to make a decent base gasket. All right, I've got this new piston stuck on here. I've got some lube on that top bearing, so now we just gotta end up making a base gasket for it. I've got a base gasket cut out of some gasket paper, about to silicone the shit out of it, and then throw this on there, and then we can work on working that cylinder on. That's always kind of the point of that's always kind of the difficult part. These 488s never really fought me too bad from when I've done them before. So okay, well, I got the cylinder on there, got a bunch of RTV on there. Yeah, it didn't really go too bad, so everything looks good. I'm gonna put the head on, probably work on the air shrouding a little bit, put all that back on, and then we should be good to throw this in the sled. All right, so I've got the carb boots on, got all the shrouding on. Now we're ready to get the flywheel and all that stuff sorted out. So we got it as far together as it's gonna go on the bench here. Now I'm just gonna do a quick compression test to see where both of our cylinders are at. I'm expecting them to be fairly different until that one wears in, just because those rings don't match with those cylinders from a different piston, you know, and all that type of shit. So anyway, the other thing is that gasket thickness probably isn't the same as that one, so I don't know. I don't really care. I think I've personally kind of proven to myself that these 488s are pretty much bulletproof, so I'm not really going to care about it. So got about 150 psi on the cylinder we didn't touch. This is a wet compression test too, so it's going to be fairly high numbers since, you know, oil in the cylinders, but I figure that's kind of essential. You know, I decided to put more lube in that cylinder. What if I'm doing that one? Might as well do both of them, because, you know, fresh-ish, you know, rebuild really should get, you know, as much lubrication as possible. I'm also going to mix that entire left of that quart, or that's most of a quart, into the gas tank, because breaking in, you kind of want more oil. This other cylinder that we just rebuilt is at a bit over 150, so I mean, I did also kind of pull harder on this one and pull it a few more times, but yeah, our cylinders are both fairly healthy, so I think that's ready to go onto the sled. It's the next day. We got the motor out. Now we just got to switch the clutch from that motor over to the other one, switch the engine plate over, and plop it back in. We got this motor prepared. All right, so I got the motor plopped in there. Now we just got to hook up literally everything. All right, Alright, so I got the motor bolted in now. I got the oil injection stuff figured out. I think for this, at this point, I'm going to get everything from the front side of this, meaning all the fuel lines, the carburetors figured out. I think I'm going to change the carburetors just because I was having bad luck with, I was having bad luck with these. I don't know what the hell its issue was, but yeah, I'm going to end up putting different carburetor ons, getting carburetors on, rejetting them all. Get everything buttoned up over here, then we got to move over to here. I think I'm going to put the starter on before the Y pipe because that's the way it looks like it'll go easier. And then that's really all there is to it. It's only been an hour or two. Really aren't a hard motor to put on. So we're almost done. The last thing we've got to do is modify the exhaust. So this is the 440 exhaust, and that is a 488 exhaust. I'm gonna try and use the 488 exhaust on the 488, and these are exactly the same. Surprisingly, even though this is for an Evo chassis, but anyway. The only difference is that end thing here, so I think I gotta just cut that off and go with one less spring, or maybe just drill a hole, and I might even be able to put the spring back in. And yeah, that'll be it for the exhaust, and then should be ready to fire up and see how she runs. I got those carburetors on, rejetted them for the 488, so that should all be good. I think I cleaned out the idle jets too, or the pilot jets. Those were actually kind of plugged, so that was a slight issue anyway. So anyway, I'm gonna get on to cutting this thing. This is what we got. I just cut it off there, cut that weld. I got a hole drilled here that hopefully I can put a spring in and have all 4 springs on this exhaust. Okay, well that pipe is a bit of a tight squeeze, but we got her in there. Didn't quite get that last spring on, but you don't really need that, so. And now we're just going to run it. I don't think it's close enough to anything to melt it. And this one even actually has an indent for this little hump up here that always gets melted off on these. So that's good. So we're not going to ruin that. I don't think it's too close to the hood. So I think we're good. We're about ready to, yeah, I think we're ready to fire this up and see how she runs. I just got done with the first ride of this thing. Ran pretty decent. I didn't really give it full throttle because I'm kind of waiting for that piston to wear in. And I had a couple issues. Number one, this thing flipped down and got in the way of the steering, so I couldn't steer one way, but that's, not a big deal. Just pry that up, gonna have to tighten that bolt. Bigger issue is this 488 decided to immediately blow a head gasket, so that's not like a huge deal, but I'm just kind of confused as to why. But I mean, I've got another head and gasket, so I might just throw those on quick and see if that fixes it. All right, so I've got a new head and gasket on there. This is the old one. Gonna tighten this down as best I can and put her back on and hope that this one doesn't also blow. We got our head torqued on. Now we just got to put our air shroud on and hope this Subaru made motor stops acting like it. Alright, so the audio in this next part is absolute trash, but basically what happened after the end of the last clip was the problem that I was initially having where it would stall out every 5 or 10 minutes and not run ended up being the fact the original pickup tube was still in the bottom of the tank, and after so many years of it being there, it finally shredded, or basically degraded into a bunch of small pieces that kept on plugging the fuel filter, and I didn't catch that. So I ended up replacing the tank with another tank, flushing out that other tank, and it ended up running perfectly for the rest of that season, up on until these last few clips where it's the beginning of the next season, because the majority of this video took place 2 years ago. Then now this was this last year, and basically I just end up cleaning the carbs in these clips and getting it running. Now all that's not to say that the 488 swap was a waste of time. The factory 440, like I mentioned earlier, had a bad crank bearing, both bad crank seals, and I also just remembered that it also has a bad piston, so the 488 still runs great to this day. Alright, well that's all the footage I have for this video. I hope to see you guys next time. Goodbye.